Have you ever wondered how one conflict, unfolding thousands of miles away, could change the price of gas in your hometown, shake the global economy, and pull the world's most powerful nations toward a much larger confrontation? It may sound impossible, but history has shown that some of the biggest global crises began with moments that, at first, seemed small. Today, the Middle East stands at another dangerous crossroads. The headlines are filled with missile strikes, military deployments, threats of retaliation, and warnings about a wider regional war. Recent fighting has once again raised fears that the confrontation between Iran, Israel, and the United States could expand beyond national borders, affecting global trade, energy supplies, and international security. But here's the real question. How did we get here? Why have Iran and Israel become such bitter rivals? Why has the United States remained deeply involved for decades? And why do millions of people around the world believe that this conflict could reshape the future of global politics? To answer those questions, we have to travel back nearly half a century. Because this story didn't begin with missiles, it didn't begin with nuclear facilities, and it certainly didn't begin with today's headlines. It began with a revolution. Before 1979, Iran and Israel were not enemies. In fact, they quietly cooperated. Iran was ruled by Shah Mohammad Reza Pahlavi, a close ally of the United States. American companies invested heavily in Iran. Western governments viewed the country as one of their most important partners in the Middle East. Israel also maintained discreet relations with Tehran. Although many people today find that surprising, the two countries shared strategic interests during the Cold War. Everything changed in 1979. That year, millions of Iranians took to the streets. The monarchy collapsed. Ayatollah Ruhollah Khomeini returned from exile. Iran became an Islamic republic. And almost overnight, the country's foreign policy changed completely. The new leadership rejected American influence. Relations with Israel collapsed. The United States and Iran quickly became adversaries. From that point forward, decades of distrust, sanctions, proxy conflicts, intelligence operations, and political hostility transformed the region into one of the most unstable places on Earth. But this wasn't just about politics. It was also about power, influence, and survival. Iran wanted to expand its regional influence. Israel viewed Iran's growing military capabilities and nuclear ambitions as a major security threat. The United States sought to prevent the balance of power in the Middle East from shifting in ways that could threaten its allies in global energy markets. Over time, these competing goals created a rivalry that stretched far beyond the borders of either country. Instead of fighting each other directly, they often supported opposing groups across the region. Conflicts in Lebanon, Syria, Iraq, and Yemen became part of a much larger geopolitical struggle. For years, many experts described it as a shadow war. Cyber attacks, covert operations, sanctions, targeted assassinations, proxy forces. Each side tried to weaken the other without triggering a full-scale regional war. But shadow wars don't stay in the shadows forever. Eventually, the pressure becomes too great, and one mistake, one attack, or one political decision can change everything. That's exactly what began happening in recent years. The confrontation became increasingly direct, drawing greater international attention and raising concerns about the security of strategic waterways, such as the Strait of Hormuz, through which a significant share of the world's oil trade passes. And that's where our story truly begins. Because what started as decades of rivalry was slowly transforming into something the entire world could no longer ignore. For decades, the conflict between Iran and Israel remained mostly invisible. There were no massive tank battles, no official declarations of war. Instead, it became one of the most sophisticated shadow conflicts in modern history. While the world focused on larger wars, Iran and Israel were fighting each other in ways that rarely made front-page news. Cyber attacks shut down critical infrastructure. Scientists involved in Iran's nuclear program were assassinated. Military facilities mysteriously exploded. Ships linked to both countries were attacked in regional waters. Neither side officially claimed responsibility for many of these incidents, but the message was always clear. The rivalry was becoming more dangerous. At the center of this confrontation was one issue that worried world leaders more than almost anything else: Iran's nuclear program. Iran has consistently stated that its nuclear activities are for peaceful purposes, including energy production and scientific research. However, Israel, the United States, and several other countries have long feared that Iran could eventually acquire the capability to build a nuclear weapon. International inspectors, negotiations, sanctions, and diplomatic efforts became part of a years-long struggle over Iran's nuclear activities, with major powers attempting to limit uranium enrichment through agreements such as the 2015 nuclear deal, while disagreements later led to renewed tensions. For Israel, this wasn't simply another diplomatic disagreement. Israeli leaders repeatedly described the possibility of a nuclear-armed Iran as an existential threat. That belief shaped military planning for years. But there was another battlefield, one that most people never think about: the sea. More specifically, a narrow stretch of water called the Strait of Hormuz on a map. It doesn't look very impressive. At its narrowest point, it's only a few dozen kilometers wide, yet every day, a significant share of the world's seaborne oil passes through this single maritime corridor. If traffic through the strait were seriously disrupted, energy prices and global shipping could be affected almost immediately, which is why governments around the world closely monitor developments there. Suddenly, a conflict in the Middle East becomes everyone's problem, not just for countries in the region, but for families buying gasoline, factories producing goods, airlines purchasing fuel, and businesses moving products across continents. This is why military planners pay so much attention to Iran's geography. Iran sits along the northern coast of the Strait of Hormuz. Over the years, Iran has invested heavily in missiles, naval forces, drones, and coastal defenses. Officials have occasionally warned that if Iran were attacked, shipping through the strait could be disrupted. Many analysts believe that any prolonged disruption would carry significant economic consequences, although the exact outcome would depend on the scale of the conflict and international responses. Meanwhile, Israel has continued strengthening its own military capabilities: advanced missile defense systems, long-range aircraft, cyber capabilities, intelligence operations. Its strategy has focused on detecting and responding to potential threats before they grow larger. This difference in military strategy created a dangerous balance. Iran developed regional networks and missile capabilities. Israel emphasized intelligence, precision strikes, and layered air defense. Neither side wanted a full-scale regional war, but neither side was willing to back down. Then, everything began changing. Instead of remaining hidden, the confrontation started becoming increasingly direct. Military operations, retaliatory strikes, and public warnings raised fears that decades of shadow conflict could evolve into open confrontation involving multiple countries. Governments around the world began preparing for scenarios that, only a few years earlier, many believed could still be avoided. The question was no longer whether tensions existed. Everyone already knew that. The real question became, how far could this escalation go? And if the conflict expanded, would it remain a regional crisis or become something much bigger? If this conflict were only about Iran and Israel, the world would be watching. But it wouldn't be worried. The real concern begins when you look at the countries standing behind them. Because this is no longer just a regional rivalry. It's part of a much larger geopolitical competition. And that's where the story becomes even more complicated. Let's start with the United States. For decades, Washington has considered Israel one of its closest allies. The two countries cooperate closely on intelligence, missile defense, military technology, and regional security. The United States also maintains military bases and personnel across the Middle East. Its stated goals have included protecting allies, ensuring freedom of navigation, combating armed extremist groups, and helping maintain stability in a region that remains critical to the global economy. That means any major escalation involving Israel immediately attracts American attention. Not because the United States wants another war, but because instability in the Middle East can quickly spread beyond the region. Then there's Russia. Russia and Iran have strengthened their relationship over recent years. The two countries have expanded cooperation in areas including defense, energy, and diplomacy. Both have also shared interests in conflicts such as Syria, where they supported the government of Bashar al-Assad. But that doesn't mean Russia automatically wants a larger regional war. Like many major powers, Russia has its own strategic priorities. A wider conflict could create opportunities in some areas, but also serious risks in others. China faces a different challenge. Unlike many people think, China's biggest concern isn't choosing sides. It's protecting its economy. China imports large amounts of energy from the Middle East, its factories, its shipping industry, and much of its economic growth depend on stable international trade. If shipping lanes become dangerous, or energy prices rise sharply, China feels the impact almost immediately. That's one reason Beijing has repeatedly called for de-escalation and diplomatic solutions during regional crises. Now think about this. The world's three largest military powers, the United States, China, and Russia, all have different interests in the same region. None of them necessarily wants a major regional war, but each one is trying to protect its own strategic interests. History has shown that when several powerful countries become involved in the same crisis, the risk of misunderstanding increases, not because anyone plans a global war, but because events can move faster than diplomacy. And then, there are the regional actors. Across the Middle East, governments are making difficult calculations. Some are strengthening air defenses, others are increasing military readiness. Many are preparing for possible disruptions to trade, energy supplies, or regional security. At the same time, millions of civilians across the region are living with uncertainty, wondering whether the next day will bring calm or another round of escalation. This is exactly why investors, energy companies, airlines, and governments monitor every major development, because markets react long before conflicts are resolved. Sometimes, just the possibility of a wider war is enough to influence oil prices, insurance costs for shipping, financial markets, and global supply chains. The modern world is deeply connected. A crisis in one region can affect people who live thousands of miles away. But perhaps the biggest question remains unanswered. What happens next? Will diplomacy succeed in reducing tensions? Could future military actions trigger a broader regional confrontation? Or will both sides continue trying to avoid a full-scale war while still responding to each new attack? No one can answer those questions with certainty, and that's exactly what makes this conflict so closely watched around the world. Because history has often shown that the most important moments are the ones nobody fully expects. History teaches us something surprising. Most major wars were never supposed to become major wars. Many began with leaders believing they could control the situation, that a single strike, a limited operation, or a strong warning would force the other side to back down. Sometimes that worked, but sometimes it triggered a chain of events that nobody could stop. That is why military analysts continue to watch the Middle East so closely today. Not because anyone can predict the future, but because history reminds us that escalation often happens one decision at a time. So, what could happen next? While no one knows for certain, experts generally discuss several possible scenarios. The first, and perhaps the most hopeful, is gradual de-escalation. Diplomatic efforts, international pressure, and back-channel negotiations could reduce tensions and prevent a broader regional conflict. This has happened before. Even after periods of intense confrontation, countries have sometimes stepped back from the brink when the costs became too high. The second scenario is a prolonged regional standoff. Instead of one massive war, the conflict continues through limited military operations, cyber attacks, proxy groups, sanctions, and political pressure. In many ways, this would resemble the pattern the region has experienced for years. It would remain dangerous, but without expanding into a full-scale regional war. The third scenario is the one governments hope to avoid: a wider regional conflict. Such a scenario could involve additional countries, greater disruption to shipping routes, more severe impacts on energy markets, and increased humanitarian consequences across the region. This does not mean such an outcome is inevitable. It is simply one of several possibilities that analysts consider when assessing geopolitical risks, regardless of which scenario unfolds. One thing is already clear: the world has changed. Conflicts are no longer isolated. A missile launched in one region can influence financial markets on another continent within minutes. A disruption to a shipping lane can affect factories thousands of miles away. A political decision made in one capital can reshape alliances across the globe. The modern world is connected like never before, and perhaps that is the biggest lesson of all. This story isn't only about Iran, or Israel, or the United States. It's about how interconnected our world has become. A conflict that begins in one region can influence energy prices, global trade, international diplomacy, national security, and the daily lives of people who have never visited the Middle East. That is why millions continue to follow every new development, not because they know what will happen next, but because they understand that the outcome could affect everyone. As historians often remind us, the events that reshape the world rarely announce themselves in advance. People usually recognize their importance only after history has already changed. Perhaps years from now, this period will be remembered as another chapter in a long regional rivalry. Or perhaps it will be remembered as the moment when the global balance of power began to shift once again. Only time will tell. If you enjoyed this documentary and want clear, in-depth explanations of the world's biggest geopolitical stories, make sure to subscribe to Global Origins. Every week, we go beyond the headlines to explain the history, the strategy, and the hidden forces shaping our world. Because understanding the world today is the best way to prepare for tomorrow. Thanks for watching.